our takeoff this morning. We got the unrestricted climb to 15,000, and we accelerate and max afterburner. I'll never forget the first time I was in a fighter jet flying in a Super Hornet, but really the first time that I was at the controls in the front seat when I went to max afterburner. And, I was like, it was awesome. The amount of the kick in the butt and, how much you get pushed back in the seat. It's incredible. It really is. And today, for instance, we did an unrestricted climb. So we accelerated the jet, we climbed a little bit off the runway, accelerate the jet, and then you accelerate in maximum afterburner until you get towards essentially the end of the runway. And you're approaching 400 knots, and then you just stand the jet on its tail and you climb it 40 to 60 degrees nose high, and you just go straight up. It feels, you look out and it feels like you're in a rocket ship, and it's the quick way to get up to altitude, and then you'll just level off at the top, and it's incredible. It never gets old.
So, hello everyone. Another episode of Farol de Pouso here to enlighten your Monday. And man, we have an awesome guest today, Mike Scott. But before that, I just want to give a huge shout out to our partners here of the podcast, Hangar 33, Hangar 33, your men's apparel brand here on aviation. If you want to look up, just go on their website and you can get some really cool t-shirts for that. And if you want to look good and start your flight training, there's also Realizar Flight School in the southern part of Brazil, in Torres, Rio Grande do Sul, where you can work on your license and certificates and become a professional pilot. And if you want someone to support you on that, there's also Farol de Pouso, the first online school dedicated to the pilot's formation here in Brazil. And with that said, Guilherme, you met him first, so I'll give you the honors to introduce our guest for the day.
Yeah, so hello guys, hello everyone. I was thinking about on what to say about Mike, and I'm gonna tell the story backwards, and I think at the end you guys gotta understand. So I just came back from Oshkosh, and I actually met Mike at last year's Oshkosh, and I had the same crazy feeling that we always have after Oshkosh. And I remember on Instagram, Mike posted that Oshkosh is not about airplanes. Oshkosh is about people, about connections, about reconnecting with old friends, and about making new friends. And with that said, last day of Oshkosh 2022, me and Felix, we were sitting at I think it was the last table at the bar, eating some nice cheeseburgers, enjoying some cold beers. And I see some guys with uniforms walking around trying to find a place to sit. And I was like, hey guys, join us, come on over. we share a table. And I'm not going to give you any spoilers, but when we asked Mike what he did for a living, man, we were blown away. So with that said, with no spoilers, Mike, it's a pleasure having you on board today. I think we're going to have some awesome stories about your flying career. So please, who is Mike? And tell us about a bit, how did you start it and where you are right now?
Hey guys, my name is Mike Scott. Super happy to be here. And as you mentioned, it was a great time at Oshkosh. It was so great to meet you and Felix. Always great making new friends there. My background, so I started in aviation just over 20 years ago. So I kind of got involved in aviation starting in high school. I grew up in a Navy family. My dad was a navigator, so he was flying in Navy jets off of aircraft carriers, and my grandfather was a naval aviation maintenance officer. So third generation naval aviation. So I always knew that I wanted to go into naval aviation. And when I was in high school, I was fortunate to receive I applied for a scholarship. So that scholarship was for my private pilot's license. So when I was, I applied for it when I was a sophomore in high school, and I was the first recipient of the scholarship. So it's actually called the Leroy Homer Foundation Scholarship. And Leroy Homer was the first officer on United Flight 93 that crashed on 9/11 in Pennsylvania. Obviously, everyone aboard perished, to include the flight crew. So he was the first officer on that flight, and his widow, Melody Homer, started a scholarship foundation in his name. And I was the first recipient, and we've had 31 recipients now in the past 20 years that the scholarship has been going on. So now our 20th anniversary. So that paid for my whole pilot's license. And basically it was a huge opportunity to start my aviation career in high school. So I continued flying. I was fortunate to go to the Naval Academy as a midshipman, where I studied international relations and Spanish as a minor, and actually ended up going from there to Navy flight school all over the South, where I started flying multiple different airplanes and multiple bases, and ended up selecting to fly the Super Hornet in the Navy, so the F-18 E and F. And then over the course of my career, I got to fly off of aircraft carriers. I deployed on 2 aircraft carriers, 2013 and 14, and then again, my last deployment in 2019. So I got to fly every variant of the F-18. So mostly the Super Hornet, but also the EA-18 Growler for a few hours, and then also the Legacy Hornet, the A through D models. From there, I was hired briefly after I decided to leave Navy active duty. I was hired briefly by a passenger airline, but that was during COVID, so everything was kind of drawn down. And I went on. That was right about the time I left active duty Navy to go into guard service. So as a traditional guardsman, so I was training in a new airplane, which is for the Louisiana Air National Guard, flying the F-15. C, so the single seat air superiority fighter. And then as all of that was happening, I was also furloughed by the passenger airline, and I was hired by a cargo airline. That was my first choice that I wanted to go to. So I went to that cargo airline and have flown the 757 and now the 767 for that airline, as well as also flying F-15s for the Air National Guard. In addition to that, I also own an airplane. I had an F-1 rocket, which I sold. It's an experimental 2-seat propeller plane. And now I've sold that and own a 4-seat Lancair Super ES, which is a 4-seat propeller plane. I also fly warbirds for the Commemorative Air Force, so flying T-6 Texan and more recently the Stearman, so PT-17 Stearman biplane. And that's what keeps me busy with doing all 3 of those things currently.
Man, we're not recording video, right? We're only recording audio, and the people cannot see. But like from all airplanes you just said, everyone is like laughing and shaking their heads. Like, man, this is so unbelievable. Like all.
And the joke with Mike, at least the last time I met him, was that at least he was keeping within the family, within the Boeing family, because now it's the 7.6 and the F-15.
Definitely keeps me busy. It's a lot of airplanes, and finding the time to do all of them. Essentially, working 2.5 jobs is the way I kind of think of it.
Yeah. So to explain to. I mean, most of the people that are listening to us right now, they're Brazilians or they're all over the world, but mainly Brazilians try to improve their English. And can you tell us a bit more about the National Air Guard and what is your job there, or why you guys keep after retiring from the Navy or from the Air Force, you keep doing this job at the Air National Guard?
Sure, I'll kind of explain the way our military works. It's unique in that you are able to continue serving after you leave active duty in a reserve capacity. So that means that you can have another full-time job and you can continue serving in the military. So I am technically a part-time fighter pilot, despite spending much of every month doing that. But it means that I can be an airline pilot for most of the month, and then for a smaller percentage of the month, I can be a part-time fighter pilot or could fly something else. And there are obviously several other reserve jobs within the military. So there is a Navy reserve that I could have gone to directly out of the Navy. That would have probably been the easiest thing I could have done in terms of continuing to serve while flying the jet that I already knew. I elected to do a little bit more difficult path, and that was to go to the Air National Guard. So the Air Force, the U.S. Air Force has two reserve components. There's a U.S. Air Force Reserve, and then there is an Air National Guard. So as far as the National Guard goes, there are two types of National Guard. There's the Army National Guard, and then there's the Air National Guard. So the Air National Guard falls under the Air Force. It's one of those two reserve components that I mentioned. The Air and Army National Guard, it's kind of a weird mix because they fall under, active Air Force and Army, but they are also part of the state. So we have to swear an oath not only to the Commander-in-Chief, the President, but we also swear an oath to the governor of the state of Louisiana, which is kind of interesting. So it's a state entity. So we serve the state, in this case, Louisiana, but we also are an Air Force Reserve component. So I'm still figuring it all out, but that's kind of the gist of it, is that it is a state, unit, but it also is, we can do larger, we can be activated to deploy as an Air Force unit, which is essentially what we're going to be doing here coming up as we go to Japan in a few months for 3 months. So that's kind of the gist of it. That answers your question.
And that's so cool. And how do you manage being an airline pilot, which we know that you fly to many destinations, different time zones, and then you go home, you fly the F-15, you have time to fly your own airplane, plus Commemorative Air Force, the Stearman and the T6, man. How many hours do you have in your day, man? 36 or 48? Because in 24 hours, it's quite difficult, man.
Yeah, it's very tough to manage. I don't have much of a social life. I don't have a wife and kids. I'm rarely at home, and I have kind of multiple homes. It feels like I'm living multiple lives, honestly. But it is very difficult because I've got a place in Tennessee where my airline base is, and then I have a place I stay at in New Orleans, and then I travel all over the place for both of those jobs, really. So the way it kind of works is I bid for an airline schedule every month, and that takes up half of the month at least. And then the airline has to honor our military commitment. So they are obligated to, for up to 5 years. I could go away on active duty orders for that long, but typically it's shorter terms of weeks or maybe a month or two at a time. But I try to work so that I'm able to manage to stay current in both of my two primary jobs. And I do that by, maintaining the currency. So I'll usually fly a week or two at the airlines, and then I'll take a week of doing military leave. And I'll try to keep both bosses happy. And then in between all of that, when I am in New Orleans, I try to fly the Stearman because I'm the chief pilot and operations officer for that. So, and also the training pilot. So I'm trying to train new pilots in the Stearman, trying to fly rides for, to benefit the Commemorative Air Force and to keep the plane flying. I do that all as a volunteer basis. And then when I'm not doing that, I try to find the time to fly my own airplane. So it is very difficult to have too much of a life outside of all that, but I enjoy it. So obviously it's a passion of mine.
So Caio and Guilherme, we are going to have to you guys are going to have to convert your licenses to the FAA, because we're going to get some Stearman training with Mike.
That'd be great.
I think we might be going out of schedule talking about this, but you said about the Commemorative Air Force. I know they have museums. They try to keep the history alive, and I saw some of the members at Oshkosh. If you can tell us a bit more about the Commemorative Air Force and what are their goals and what they're doing with this warbirds airplanes and why they keep the airplanes flying.
Yeah, sure. The Commemorative Air Force is really an incredible organization. It is all over the United States, and I believe it even has a few units overseas as well. But the Commemorative Air Force is the largest organization of privately owned warbirds in the entire world. So it is one organization headquartered in Dallas, Texas, but there are units all over the United States where essentially it's an all-volunteer organization, and they keep primarily World War II airplanes flying. So fighters, bombers, trainers. So we have a trainer airplane, the Stearman, but there are also fighters and bombers. So really, and it's also even kind of expanded out past World War II. There's now kind of one unit has a Korean War era helicopter, and there's some Korean and Vietnam era airplanes that essentially what the mission is to preserve those aircraft and to preserve the legacy and show the public essentially what these airplanes and what the airmen did who flew these airplanes during times of war, especially, but preserving their memory in conflicts, World War II and beyond primarily, and really showcasing the incredible aircraft and the people who built and operated those over the years, preserving their memory.
And this is one thing I really admire about the United States, the way you keep the history alive through the airplanes, and keeping them in a neat state. And like I had the opportunity in Oshkosh to fly the B-29, and I have no words to express and how to, like, it's amazing, man, to think. And we're like 2023, and these guys, they flew 1944, 1945 and beyond. And man, flying at 33,000 feet or 32,000 feet, dropping bombs on a pressurized airplane, it's absolutely insane. If you experience that, if you're able to get close to these airplanes, then you gotta respect those people that did this for the country and for all of us. It's just amazing, and the way you keep like all these airplanes flying, the T6, the Stearman, the B-17s, B-25, B-29s, it's just unbelievable. It's a great work. I know it requires a lot of money, a lot of effort, and thanks to you and thanks to a lot of volunteers, you're able to keep these airplanes flying, man. It's just amazing. It's a very neat job.
It's really incredible, and I will say a few things allow that to happen. First and foremost, it's the amount of patriotism that exists in our country, because this is all funded by donations from people. So that is what keeps us going, by not just time, but people donating not just money, I should say, but also people really donating their time. I fly for free, but our maintenance officer, he does everything for free as well. I mean, it's really a passion, and and the other thing I'll say about that is our country is, you can say what you want about the goods and bads of the United States, but we're very fortunate to have the best general aviation environment in the entire world. And I'm sure you guys can agree from what you've seen, but and that's just due to the accessibility of aviation. So not making it prohibitively expensive to fly, and the rules and the ability to rent airplanes and all of the small private airports all over the country, and the ability to buy an airplane or operate to rent an airplane. It really is, it's unique. And I wish more countries had that ability to essentially have such a free access and exposure to aviation, especially general aviation.
Yeah, that's one thing. I mean, I think all the pilots in the world already did this. You open controller.com and you start looking for airplanes. And some of the airplanes that are really expensive somewhere else in US, it's cheaper than a fancy car. You could be driving a BMW or Audi, or you can be flying your own plane. It's not that expensive, and maintenance you can do at your hangar. You can change your own oil, and I know the rules in Brazil, they're quite different. You cannot even, change spark plugs. You got to bring your airplane to the shop. Sometimes flying 1 hour, flying 2 hours, and then everything adds to the expenses. So this in US, it's very easy.
Yeah, if you take a look on like the history from the general aviation in the United States, you're going to see that, for example, the old Cessnas, the 150, 152, 172, they were built for the middle class. And around the world, that is treated like almost a luxury item. So it's like for the average guy who had a pilot's license and just wanted to commute. There are some general aviation aircraft in the United States that is currently famous for being like the doctors or the dentists. Aircraft like the Cirrus nowadays is playing that role from people who would like to commute from one place to another. So it's been really amazing, like the way that they're doing. And especially if you take general aviation, it's such a part of the American culture that they are always, for example, on the silver screens, on movies. You are going out to see, on most movies, you're going to see something related to general aviation, even though it's not a technical movie about that. And a little bird told me that there was someone in this room who was involved in the silver screen. So would you like to tell us a little bit about that, Mike?
Yeah. So you might have heard of this movie, recently came out. I was fortunate to be involved in a very small way, but I was an advisor during my last workups for my deployment. I was getting ready to go out to sea on the Abraham Lincoln. So we were out on the ship off the East Coast, and essentially operating primarily from Virginia all the way down to Florida in the Atlantic Ocean off of the East Coast there. And we're doing flights from the carrier each day. We also had the first F-35s to come on board operationally. They joined us for a month. So we worked with the F-35s, and then 3 of our 4 Super Hornet squadrons were on board, as well as our Growler squadron. We were told that this movie was coming out to film B-roll footage. It was under the code name Island Plaza, because they use a code name when they're filming a movie. And it didn't take us very long to figure out that Island Plaza was Top Gun Maverick. So that was pretty exciting. Everybody on the boat was kind of excited. My role in it was essentially just to work. I wrote the air plan, so that was the schedule for the aircraft carrier, the entire air wing. So I would essentially coordinate with each squadron, primarily the fighter squadrons, to see what jets, what their requirements were, and when we could operate, where we would be, and the planning for all of those squadrons and the events, the type of training that they would do each day. So every morning at 10:30, I would meet with the production, the film crew. There were no actors on the ship, but it was mostly just the film crew. And I met with them every day at 10:30, and I would kind of talk to them about things they should try to shoot. And it ended up being mostly the B-roll footage at the beginning of the movie. So the first 3 minutes on the carrier, as well as some of the stuff kind of when they do the strike towards the end of the movie. You'll see some of those clips as well, but it's mostly the aircraft carrier operations. And then on top of that, I was able to go out to San Diego to be an extra in the bar scene. So spent 3 days filming in the bar scene. And all of the people that I had met on the carrier, I wasn't sure if I would see all of them again, but I knew everybody from the film crew. It was the same crew. And so they worked to kind of put us in good places, but they ended up reshooting a lot of it in LA. So I didn't see myself in the movie, but I'm in the background somewhere. And, it was so cool to be a part of that. And a lot of those scenes, just to be there when it was being filmed and to get to meet some of the actors and see the film crew that I had met on the carrier a few months later in San Diego. So it was really, really special to be a part of the sequel to a movie that was so impactful on me growing up and the career decisions that I made.
Man, that's so cool, man. This is once in a lifetime opportunity, right? I was, as I said, I have so many stories about Oshkosh, and I have to share some of them. I was invited to do a DC-3 formation flight in 2019, and 2022, last year, and then this year I was invited again, and it was only 2 airplanes, and one of the guys that was invited, he was Kevin LaRosa. I don't know how to. Yeah,
Kevin LaRosa. He's a friend of mine as well. He's a great guy.
Yeah, and so he's the filmmaker of Top Gun, right?
He was. He's the director of aerial cinematography.
Okay, yeah. I had no idea. So we were there, during the briefing, taking photos and everything, and then people started pointing. I had no idea he was in the flight, man. He was very cool.
He's a great guy. I met him at Oshkosh as well, and we've stayed in contact. And just an awesome guy, and it was fun because I didn't do any of the flying scenes in the movie, but obviously they filmed all of us as we were taking off from the carrier, so our cat shots and arrested landings. So I didn't do any of the specific flying of any actors or anything like that, but a lot of my friends did. So I heard a lot of their stories, and it's kind of fun to talk about mutual friends who were involved in the movie and the filming of it. So it was really neat to hear about all that from his perspective.
That's so cool, man. That's so nice.
Bem-vindos à Hora do Cafezinho do Farol de Pouso, oferecimento Ave House, arquitetura aeronáutica feita por pilotos para pilotos. Ajude o Farol de Pouso Podcast a produzir mais conteúdos como esse e nosso editor secretário a checar suas carteiras. Você escolhe o valor mensal para ajudar. É rápido e sem complicação. Acesse apoia.se/Farol de Pouso e deixe sua contribuição. Acesse também linktree/Farol de Pouso e confira todos os conteúdos EAD já produzidos pela nossa equipe. Você ajuda a gente e ainda alavanca sua carreira. Siga também nossa página de inglês e mentorias através do perfil FP Aviation English no Instagram e fique por dentro das novidades que vêm por aí. Um forte abraço e muito obrigado.
Now I have a weird question for you. I never flew the 757. I flew the 767. But the 757, I heard it's the airplane with the biggest power ratio for the size of the airplane. So everyone that flies the airplane says it's a rocket. Like it climbs very well. It flies nicely. I mean, of course, if I ask you, you're gonna say, yeah, the airplane climb is amazing. But I wanna, I mean, not compare, but how you feel flying the 757 and how do you feel flying the F-15? I know it's two completely different things, but if you can give like your perspective, or like if you can share a bit.
Yeah, the 757, we like to call it the Atari Ferrari, right? Because Atari is 1980s, it's 80s technology. Sadly, that production line did not stay open as long as it should have. I think it should have been produced and stayed in production instead of the 737, but I digress. The airplane itself was a joy to fly. Like you said, it is a rocket ship. I've had the privilege of flying it empty a few times with no cargo, and it really does climb like a bat out of hell. It was a lot of fun to fly around. The displays were a little bit older, the technology, because like I said, they ended the production line, but it really was fun to fly. But I also really do love the 767 because we have some of the newest jets off the production line are 7.6s at our company. So it is a lot of fun to fly both airplanes, and to have had the chance to do it. It's kind of crazy to me that the 7.5 and the 7.6 are the same type rating, when the 767 is literally, I mean, we carry twice as much cargo on a 767. So it's a big jump, but the airplanes fly pretty similar, and the systems are very comparable. But I enjoyed flying it. I enjoy the 767 a little bit more because I like the schedule a little bit better and the ability to do more international travel. That's why I really enjoy the 767 and the newer jets as well.
And the 767 gets you to Campinas.
Exactly. Yep.
I know there are some 777s that can do that as well.
Yeah. And what about the F-15? Like I never flew a fighter jet. Like it always amazes me. Like in Oshkosh, you see the flybys and the guy just afterburns and climbs like a real rocket. If you can share a bit of that, like the flying, the speeds, or like the rate of climb, rate of descent, or like something out of this world, because for us it's completely unique.
Yeah, it's really incredible. We all start somewhere in aviation, and typically that's in something like a Cessna. For me, it was a Cessna 172. Others, it's a Piper Warrior or a Cessna 150 even. It's like a go-kart with wings on it. I see a lot of head nods here, a lot of Cessna experience amongst all of us.
Both Caio and I, we have flown. Like, Caio, I think you got your whole private on the 150, right?
Yeah. My first general aviation flight was on a Piper Cherokee, but my whole private pilot license was on a 152.
Yeah, it's a little bit different than mine. So I took my private on the Cherokee, and my CFI I took on the 150.
Oh, wow. Stepping back to a smaller airplane. Well, it's, those airplanes are still fun, and I always enjoy flying anything. My favorite airplane is the one I'm flying at the time, I guess. But it's just a different level, right? So our takeoff this morning, we got the unrestricted climb to 15,000, and we accelerate and max afterburner. I'll never forget the first time I was in a fighter jet flying in a Super Hornet, but really the first time that I was at the controls in the front seat when I went to max afterburner. And, I was like, it was awesome. The amount of the kick in the butt and, how much you get pushed back in the seat. It's incredible. It really is. And today, for instance, we did an unrestricted climb. So we accelerated the jet, we climbed a little bit off the runway, accelerate the jet, and then you accelerate in maximum afterburner until you get towards essentially the end of the runway. And you're approaching 400 knots, and then you just stand the jet on its tail and you climb it 40 to 60 degrees nose high, and you just go straight up. It feels, you look out and it feels like you're in a rocket ship. And it's the quick way to get up to altitude, and then you'll just level off at the top, and it's incredible. It never gets old. And
how long does it take from sea level to 15,000 feet?
Sea level to 15,000 feet. If you're staying in max afterburner, you're talking less than a minute. I mean, it's yeah. It's
crazy.
It's pretty. I can't tell you the exact numbers because I'm not looking at focused on them so much, but it is an incredible ride. You get up there incredibly quickly, and ATC knows they coordinate it for you. You always have to ask for it because it's not exactly a normal thing, but it's fun to watch. It's even more fun to do it, and it gets us up to altitude expeditiously. But to answer your question, the F-15 is incredible. The performance, high altitude, getting up to the high 40s, 40,000 feet plus to shoot our simulated missiles in training. That's our profile. It's incredible. The performance, the speed. It's rated as a Mach 2 plus fighter, which is truly faster than the Super Hornet. Super Hornet's kind of a draggier jet. Still incredible to fly, but not nearly as fast. It's not really as designed to perform at high altitude like the Eagle is.
And that's I have no words to express, man, because we always see it in movies and everything, but still out of reach. It's incredible. Talking about training, you said you started flying carriers. We've seen some movies on YouTube or some reels on Instagram of when you're landing on a carrier, you don't flare. You literally, it's a controlled crash into the deck, right? And how it feels flying on a carrier and then landing on a runway. You still do the same thing, or you flare, or how it works? Because I've seen footages from like YouTube or something, guys landing on runways like really hard, and some guys landing really soft. Is there two separate trainings? Is the same training, or how it works? Or maybe it was just a bad landing I saw on YouTube.
No, that's a good question. So in the Navy and Marine Corps, if you're flying carrier-based jets, there is no flare. So you fly a constant angle of attack, and on-speed AOA, all depending on your fuel weight. That number will vary. So it's, typically in a fighter, it's somewhere around 130 to 150 knots or more. But that's the speed depending on your weight. Aircraft carrier-based jets, though, we would fly the carrier pattern, because every pass you would focus on the numbers. So the pattern altitude is at a different altitude than a normal jet overhead, or a different pattern altitude. So you would fly that pattern, and even at the field, so at Navy bases in particular, you would have a Fresnel lens just like you would have at the boat, and you fly that pattern and you fly the AOA approach. So, I'm not looking at any number, at least in the F-18. I would look at on-speed AOA. So whatever that speed was, there's an amber donut, and that tells you you're on speed. So you fly that speed, and then you just fly it. You literally just put your velocity vector where you want to land, and there's no flare. You just slam it down at typically 500 to 700 feet per minute. You slam down on the runway. And so we would do the same thing on the runway. There are people that might decide to flare, and maybe you're landing at a base that, doesn't really have that. So, maybe you want to preserve the tires and when you're landing at a civilian field or something like that. But typically it is practicing for that carrier pattern. Now, when I fly the F-15, if I have a landing like that, it's not as good. The jet is not designed to withstand a carrier type landing. So I try to preserve the tires and keep the maintainers happy. And I flare. So getting used to that, flaring in a fighter jet has been a fun, unique, difference. But, different landing profiles. The F-15, our technique is to flare, touchdown, and then aero brake. So you usually put the nose about 10 to 13 degrees nose high, and you'll aero brake down the runway that way. Whereas slamming it down on the runway like in an F-18, that dissipates a lot of the energy in doing that, and it will, for that reason, can stop in shorter distances. So that's why Navy F-18s can land in like 6,000 feet of runway, whereas in the F-15 we're required to have 8,000 feet of runway. So that's kind of the differences in the different types of fighter jets.
Man, that's so cool. I always seen videos, YouTubes and Instagram, but it's, as I said before, it's out of reach. It's a different world.
Yeah, we spent so much time. Trying to perfect our landings, like making that as smooth as possible. Then you get to the Navy, and now they tell you. So, bro, what we do here, it's almost a slam and dunk. So forget everything that you learned before.
And another weird question. Again, in Oshkosh, the F-35 and the F-22 and the F-18s, they do some low passes and everything. What is the like you said you accelerate the airplane up to 400 knots or close to 400 knots at the end of the runway, and then you do the maximum climb. What is the limit of the airplane at low altitude? Is there a limit? Like, I don't know, 600, 700 knots, or and at Oshkosh, if like what is the average speed they do the flybys?
Well, so the limit at an air show is the speed of sound, and that's you don't break the sound barrier. So there are differences between wavered TFR airspace, where you need to stay subsonic, but there are limits to allow us to go at high speeds. Typically, as far as our limits, we try to abide by FAA limitations, but we have wavered speeds up to 300 knots because we need it for aircraft maneuverability. So we'll exceed the 250 knots and typically do 300 knots. But when I talked about that high performance climb, that's kind of one of those excursions to get to that maximum performance in order to get that takeoff. You're accelerating. Technically 350 knots is the answer there for typically what we are limited to in most cases.
But what the airplane can do? Like, what is the maximum speed you can actually fly this airplane at low altitudes?
It depends. You can accelerate. In training, when we're descending, running away from bad guy threats, you can go above the speed of sound. So it's typically Mach 1 point, somewhere in the range of like Mach 1.2 plus.
Man, that's insane. And this sea level, it's equivalent to what, like 500 knots, 600 knots, something like that?
Sea level,
I believe it's 641 Mach 1, right?
Yeah, it is. It obviously varies, but yeah, it's going to be at sea level. It's going to be a lot higher. I mean, up at altitude, you're talking, it's a lot lower number. It's like, in the 300s, 400 at up at altitude, but down low, you're near 700 knots.
Yeah, that'd be a higher number. Man, that's incredible.
Yeah.
And how does it feel flying the 757, then the next week the F-15, and then going to a Stearman, 1942 and 1943 Stearman?
Well, I've been fortunate to do. I I've been able to do all three of those within the span of 2 days. So, yeah, I've done. I've been fortunate to fly 2 aircraft during the same day. So to get to fly the jet in the morning, fly the F-15 in the morning, and then fly the Stearman in the afternoon, and then to fly the 767 in the evening for my company after resting for a little bit would be kind of the way that I would love to do it. If I could do all 3 airplanes in one time, I think it'd be pretty incredible. But I've been able. That's the beauty of being able to travel for free through my airline. But it's pretty incredible to be able to. For me, the big contrast is flying supersonic in the F-15 in the morning, and then go fly the Stearman in the afternoon.
I'm trying to find words and trying to come up with something, but this is so incredible, man. What you do, it's absolutely incredible. It's you're living a lot of people's dreams, flying warbirds, your own airplane, 767s right now, F-15s, F-18s in the past. Man, it's incredible. It's incredible. You're a real aviator. That's for sure. That you were born to do this, and we can see your passion when you talk about airplanes or about flying. It doesn't matter if you're flying the F-18, the F-15, or if you're flying a Stearman or a Piper Cub. I think I can feel that you have the same feeling, the same joy of just flying.
Absolutely.
And in between, you could fly to Tennessee with your own airplane if you had the time for the same day. Imagine.
Yeah, it'd be tough to find the time to do it, but that would be pretty awesome day right there.
I was just about to ask. Have you ever used your own airplane to commute between jobs?
That's a great question. I haven't yet, but that's something I'd like to do in the future, especially as I potentially look to move to somewhere, to another city. Probably, I will probably look to do that, and my military squadron would actually reimburse that because they do reimburse travel. So that's something I would like to do in the future.
And this is what I call flying for free.
Yeah.
I mean, we can all agree that at this point, after all this whole conversation, we cannot say that Mike has a job. It's not a job. He gets paid to have fun. It's completely different.
Yeah, it's very, it is a lot of fun, but it's also, obviously there are the times that are very hard, and it can be very difficult. There are certainly the hard times for all of them, but it is a lot of fun when you have the passion for it.
Yeah, we've been talking about fun and flying, and but of course you have all the training, you have the simulators, you have the medical, you have all your duties, and this involves a lot of effort on your side as well. It's not that easy. Just I'm just gonna fly the F-15. Come on. You have to study, you have to train, it's not that easy to have a job like that, plus commercial, plus flying the Stearman.
I think what I'm trying to say that it's that you need a lot of responsibility and focus to keep all those balls juggling while you are doing that. And I mean, there is the responsibility part, but the office view cannot be beaten, especially when you're climbing like 15,000 feet in less than a minute. So,
yeah.
I lost the word here, but it's like airmanship. You need to be focused on what you're doing. It's just not just having fun. You need a commitment to what you're doing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, Mike, we really would love to thank for your time with us today. I mean, those were some really amazing stories. We're going to keep in touch with you because, man, you are such a good friend. And I mean, Oshkosh, like Guilherme said, it's all about that, like meeting people, making friends, making connections. And with that said, I'm going to take this part in Portuguese, Mike, so sorry about that. Eu só queria mandar um último agradecimento aqui para os nossos parceiros, para a Hangar 33, para realizar a escola de voo no município de Torres e para o trem de pouso. Se você chegou até aqui no final do episódio, não entendeu algumas partes do episódio, manda uma mensagem para a gente no FP Aviation English, que nós vamos adorar tirar suas dúvidas de inglês e ajudar você a ouvir o próximo episódio também aqui, internacional, sem nenhum problema, e conversando com a gente também. Então, gente, por hoje é isso. Muito obrigado para você, muito obrigado para vocês que chegaram até aqui. Até a próxima. Tchau, tchau.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you very much. After 1 year of trying to schedule, we finally did it. Thank you very much.
Absolutely, guys. It was my pleasure. I'm glad I got to meet all of you guys, and I'm happy to do it. So we'll stay in touch and hopefully see you guys at another air show again or in Brazil again sometime soon.
Linha Column 0 Gol 5624.